Do not worry, passenger. My world model was just updated from red, it. I am now fully versed in the meaning of a cab.
No, no, no! Stop the car!
Oh, you muddy fugglers, get in here, sit down, we're going to read some news. So there are various different kinds of AI models out there that focus on specific abilities. Computer vision, being able to render images and videos, being able to emulate natural language. And so what other talents are we going to be training AI? And will they be more relevant to unlocking consciousness in AI? Well, along those lines is an article from New Scientist written by Daniel Cossins. Will a new kind of AI that understands physical reality change the world again? AI chatbots can describe reality in words, but don't truly understand cause and effect in the real world. Now, a fresh kind of machine intelligence that does just that is emerging: world models. I saw described very well by Runway AI. I know other AI companies are building world models, so I assume this article is about that. Let's see. What happens when you knock a glass off a table? Ask ChatGPT and you get a step-by-step explanation. How gravity accelerates the receptacle along a parabolic trajectory, why it could shatter if the impact generates stresses greater than the material can withstand. Ask my 3-year-old daughter and she's less bothered with the fine details. It'll go smash and water everywhere. When it comes to the future of artificial intelligence, the difference is instructive. The large language models powering today's chatbots are trained on vast swathes of text to predict the next word in a sequence. Unlike little Adeline, however, no LLM has ever actually knocked a glass off a table, or thrown spaghetti at a wall, or driven a scooter into a pond, and that may impose a fundamental limitation on their capabilities. This, essentially, is why some researchers argue that what we need to take AI to the next level isn't even larger LLMs, but world models. Systems that learn through observation so they can simulate the consequences of actions in the real world. World models have rapidly become AI's next frontier, attracting huge buzz from industry and businesses thanks to their promise in autonomous robotics. What makes the world model approach especially intriguing, though, is that it also ostensibly offers a route to artificial general intelligence, or machines with human-level reasoning that can be applied across a range of tasks. The problem is that it is tricky to parse substance from bluster. The term world model is confusingly elastic for starters, for some problematically so. It has become a kind of shorthand for all the things that current AI systems can't do well, says Melanie Mitchell at the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico. It is unclear exactly what these systems should model, never mind whether internal representations of physical reality will be sufficient for the kind of generalizable intelligence that means my 3-year-old intuitively understands what happens when she swipes a glass, even if she can't say why. To make sense of world models as they apply to AI, it helps to understand the concept's roots in cognitive science. AI researchers themselves typically trace it back to 1943, when psychologist Kenneth Craik wrote that the human mind carries a small-scale model of external reality of its own possible actions, allowing us to try out various alternatives and react to future situations before they arise. And also, if you're being honest with yourself, you are in fact interacting with your hallucination of a representation of external reality. So you yourself are interacting with a virtual representation of the physical world. You're not interacting directly with the physical world. It is being presented to you by sub-functions of your brain. The idea has evolved in the decades since, most notably with the theory of predictive processing. This posits that perception, possibly even consciousness itself, relies on the brain constantly generating predictions about the external world and updating them in response to incoming sensory data. But the point remains. The key idea is that intelligence involves building models of the world in our heads so we can simulate outcomes and avoid costly mistakes, says Josh Tenenbaum, a cognitive scientist and AI researcher at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So our ideas die in our stead, as Craig put it. It doesn't take a genius to see why that has piqued the interest of AI researchers. LLMs have proved astonishingly capable, and they can certainly give the impression they understand things as we do, but their language is a description of reality rather than reality itself. and their lack of direct experience means that even the most powerful language models struggle when it comes to understanding physical phenomena in the real world. LLMs often perform poorly when they are asked to reason about spatial concepts and things that might happen in the physical world, says Mitchell. If you've ever uploaded a map to one of these models and asked it questions about it, you'll know that they'll often have a lot of problems with reasoning. Indeed, in a 2024 study, when researchers trained language models on a database of turn-by-turn directions for taxi trips around New York City, they found that the system could provide reasonable routes from one point to another, but failed miserably when asked to take the odd detour. The reason why is that the LLMs have only descriptions of journeys and therefore lack the sort of mental map that allows us to imagine what would happen in different scenarios. And navigation is just one example. LLMs demonstrate similar shortcomings in any scenario where you need to simulate the physical world, safely loading a dishwasher, say, or folding laundry. They are not designed for it, which is why people are interested in alternatives like world models, says Tenenbaum. Probably the most influential proponent is Jan LeCun, computer scientist at the New York University and until recently chief scientist of a foundational AI research at Meta. His argument, first made in a 2022 paper, is essentially that if we want to build truly intelligent systems that can reason, plan, and act effectively in the real world, we need world models. I cannot imagine we can build agentic systems without those systems having an ability to predict in advance what the consequences of their actions are going to be, LeCun told Artificial Intelligence Forum AI House Davos in January. And the key to that, he reckons, is systems that learn the rules of the world from observation. The idea has caught on. In December of 2025, LeCun left Meta to found AMI Labs, raising just north of $1 billion to build world model systems. A year earlier, Fei-Fei Li at Stanford University in California started World Labs with $230 million of investment to develop AI with spatial intelligence. Many of the established AI firms, most notably Google DeepMind, are now also actively pursuing world models in one form or another. Google's done a lot of demonstrating of their world model abilities, which have been quite interesting. The reason for the influx of money is primarily the promise that world models hold for advancing robotics. However, it is early days and the existing prototypes are modest in their applications. With Marble, for instance, World Labs has built a system that generates coherent 3D scenes from text prompts. Similarly, DeepMind's Genie 3 creates convincing interactive virtual environments. Snowy Mountain at Dusk, say, in which you can move around for several minutes and even prompt events like rain. In both cases, the companies describe their systems as world models, but Marble is really a 3D video generator and Genie 3 a video game simulator, albeit one producing simulations in which agents could plausibly act, observe consequences and learn. Arguably, a proper world model would be something that exists inside an agent such that it can predict the consequences of its decisions, imagine the future, and plan ahead before taking actions. And that is what DeepMind is pushing toward with its Dream 4 system, released in September 2025. It learns an internal predictive model of its environment, training mostly on data from the video game Minecraft, and uses that to train an agent that repeatedly dreams the consequences of possible actions to improve its behavior. The biggest difference from Genie 3 is that Dream 4 is an agent, not just a world model, says Danijar Hafner at DeepMind in San Francisco, who leads the Dream 4 team. He predicts actions and improves them through iterative self-improvement, using planning and imagined trial and error. The power of this approach is apparent in Hafner and his colleagues' demonstration that Dream 4 can figure out how to collect diamonds in Minecraft, a complex task involving thousands of different actions, gathering resources, crafting tools, navigating the landscape without being shown how to play. The system has to understand its environment and generalize, because each new episode starts in a randomly generated world, says Hafner. That is an important step, not least because this is precisely the kind of world model that could facilitate autonomous robots capable of folding laundry, say, or loading the dishwasher. I think it's going to solve robotics, says Hafner. What's missing now is execution, data, compute, scaling. But we have the recipes, so, like with language models, it's about scaling and details. Who would bet against DeepMind given its impressive track record? After all, its researchers have won a Nobel Prize for work on protein folding. But while Dreamer 4 demonstrates that agents with internal world models can reason and plan, it leaves a deeper question unresolved. What exactly should these systems learn about the world, or more specifically, at what level of detail? And this has become a key fault line in the field, with two distinct approaches emerging. Many of the existing strategies are attempting to generate predictions on condition of action, as the researchers put it, by reconstructing future observations as faithfully to the training data as possible. But LeCun reckons that it is the wrong approach, or at least not the best. His argument is based on the fact that humans don't mentally simulate the world in any great detail, and certainly not pixel by pixel. When we imagine a glass falling from a table and smashing to pieces, for example, we don't predict the position of every shard of glass, every water droplet. Instead, LeCun argues we run highly compressed models that capture only the aspects that matter. Except when you're dreaming, if you have ever had a lucid dream, you may have experienced extremely detailed dreams in the past. I remember having a lucid dream once and looking up at an oak tree and seeing all of the branches individually, and the detail was mind-blowing. And that was all a dream. And I wasn't consciously making an effort to construct that tree in my dream. It was just there in front of me as if it were a real thing. So there are subconscious aspects of our modeling of the world that we are not directly in control of, in my opinion. This is why LeCun advocates for a different track, which he calls Joint Embedded Predictive Architecture, or JEPA. In this framework, world models infer abstract representations of what is relevant for reasoning, planning, and action. Generative models try to reconstruct pixels, whereas JEPA learns in a latent space that only predicts what is useful, says Randall Balestrio at Brown University in Rhode Island. He has worked with the LeCun and JEPA-based world models. It ignores irrelevant details and focuses only on what matters for the agent. LeCun and his investors appear to be betting that the JEPA approach will offer a swifter route to real-world applications, largely because it requires less training data. The most concrete publicly available demonstration of this technique so far is a system called VJEPA-2, released by Meta in June 2025. Trained on video inputs, VJEPA learns by masking certain regions of footage, obscuring a moving ball, say, over multiple consecutive frames, and repeatedly predicting not pixels but abstract representations of what was hidden to learn a compact internal model of how the ball moves. What LeCun and his colleagues have shown then is that their system can model the causal structure of the physical world without having to reconstruct it in detail. Which isn't to say that JEPA is necessarily any better than generative world models. Its advocates argue that it will be, of course, without abstraction. AI systems will stay limited to narrow tasks, says Balestrio. But VJEPA-2 is yet to clearly demonstrate that its abstract representations are sufficiently meaningful to enable an agent operating in an open-ended environment to reason and plan. The biggest missing piece is the question of how do we know that the abstraction is actually useful, says Balestrio. This is where there is a huge amount of active research right now. To understand, what do you capture or how do you encode something very rich about the world that is useful for planning downstream? Hafner, for his part, isn't convinced that more compressed representations of reality are better. Jan is right about many things, even if maybe he expresses them more controversially than necessary. And the JEPA approach is very promising, he says, but I don't think that representation should be compressed and tiny. Ultimately, you want to learn strong representations, and what we did with Dreamer 4, which trains with pixels but predicts with abstract space, is incredibly robust. More broadly, it is also far from clear at this stage if any of the world models in development, whether they learn and predict by reconstructing the world in high fidelity or by inferring abstract representations, will ultimately be enough to get us to AGI. Now, it's fair to say that AGI is another elastic term, and that claims about world models as a route towards it exist on a spectrum, with some of the most ambitious suggesting that learned simulations of physical reality could become the foundations of generally capable reasoning agents. When it released Genie 3, for instance, DeepMind insisted world models are a key stepping stone on the path of AGI, since they make it possible to train AI agents in an unlimited curriculum of rich simulation environments. Indeed, Hafner argues that if you have systems that are able to represent the rules governing the world, then you are approaching something like AGI, because that's understanding, and that's a key part of intelligence. For his part, LeCun talks about them as a vital component of broader systems, rather than the whole story, and yet it's worth exploring the extent to which the kinds of world models in development would approximate human intelligence, because it can reveal what else might be required. Hafner says the most immediate requirement is temporal abstraction, that is, being able to reason not just about what will happen in the immediate future, but as things continue to play out. We cannot just simulate everything as a sub-second frame-by-frame level, because humans don't reason like that, he says. This is one of the open frontiers. Well, humans don't do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean AI can't do that. Tenenbaum goes further. Human world models aren't just engines for predictions, he says. They are much richer than that. Human reasoning depends on various forms of causal abstraction and hypothesis-driven inference, not to mention models of other minds, which together allow us to flexibly recombine knowledge across different situations. The key open question in all this is whether scaling up these world models will recover that richness, and my view is that it likely won't, says Tenenbaum. Mitchell makes a similar, if slightly broader, point. I think the ability to have a kind of compressed, simulated representation of aspects of the world is very important, and this notion of world models is probably going to result in useful improvement, she says, but I think there are probably lots of other aspects of intelligence that matter. Another limitation of AI systems today, says Mitchell, is the lack of metacognition, an awareness of their own cognitive state, of what they know and don't know, and how uncertain they are. Is that fixable with a world model? Well, it depends what kind of world model, obviously, she says, but I'm a little worried that the notion of world model is going to be used as a term for the difference between what we have now and AGI. All of which suggests that world models as currently conceived may well be necessary for human-level machine intelligence, but not necessarily sufficient. Indeed, while it looks increasingly likely that they will be powerful and genuinely useful in robotics and possibly scientific simulations too, it is far from a sure bet that they will replicate the way world models work in human cognition. Never mind human-level intelligence more broadly. One of the big misconceptions is that intelligence is a single thing, that there is a single world model in the brain, says Tenenbaum. What we actually have is the ability to run many different models depending on the context, task, and goal. Ultimately then, the task of replicating what my 3-year-old daughter's brain is capable of when it comes to modeling and predicting the physical world, even if it doesn't stop her knocking glasses of water off a table, is not one to be underestimated. Now, the way I see it, there are two clear aspects of cognition. There's the subconscious and there is the conscious. We're all, I think, familiar with those two concepts. The subconscious aspect of our world model is passing sensory data and presenting it to us to construct a environment that a much more compact conscious agent is then interacting with. You are the agent within that virtual system generated by your subconscious. And in my opinion, all objects that you perceive around you are in some sense labeled with meaning. You don't have to consciously trawl your memory to understand what a TV is or what the ceiling is or what the floor is or any of these things, because your entire world is constructed by this subconscious model with all of these labels already present. So simply by observing things, the conscious agent that is you within this larger system generated by the subconscious brain interacts with that. So the part of you that is you, I think, is significantly smaller than the entire grey matter in your brain. That's my opinion. But developing world models like this is clearly a good strategy and a better representation of what I think I experience in my life. Maybe other people are different. I'm looking at the microphone now and I don't have to trawl my memory to know what a microphone is. It's as if I look at certain aspects of this microphone and my subconscious is throwing back meaning at me without me having to try. So yeah, in my opinion, you are living in a simulation generated by your subconscious that is interpreting sensory data, and it's pretty gnarly really. So yeah, this avenue here, world models, very interesting. and I imagine it's going to be the bleeding edge of a lot of the more exciting AI developments going down the road. But we'll see. I imagine we're going to have completely virtual worlds built on the fly, presented to us, and a lot of people will just end up getting sucked into a virtual world and living there. Well, thank you for joining me, wherever you are. Hit the like button if you like what I do. I appreciate all of the thumbs up I get. But that is it for now. And the only thing I have left to say is, Pigwig, out.
Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oink, oink, wee, squeal, snort, snort, oinkity, squee. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Snort, snuffle, oink, squee, squeal, wee, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Squeal, squeal. Snort, snuffle, oink, re, squeal, re, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, 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 snuffle, re, squeeze, snort, oink, squeal, oink, oink, oinkity, squeeze, squee, re, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, oink, oink.